Alex, how is it going in Indianapolis? Is it fun?
Yeah, it's been good. It's my first time at the combine. There's a lot going on. It's busy, but it's been. I mean, the station's football nerd. It's been cool to be immersed in it here for the last couple days.
Yeah, and so what is the? Because I know, obviously, you're there for the Elliott Wolf press conference, and you're there, for the combine, and you're going to watch that stuff. But everyone we talk to, and writers like yourself, it's really what goes on after hours, and the kind of information you can get while people are loose and they're out. Have you been hitting the places and hanging out and talking to people?
Yeah, definitely. Been doing that. Been here 3 nights. Finally got to do St. Elmo's last night. That's kind of the staple you
Yeah.
hear a lot of people talk about. The shrimp is as advertised. That was pretty good. But yeah, you go out and you see, you'll see people that you only see on Twitter during the year or on TV or whatever, people from teams. And it's, anybody you could think of that's maybe an NFL personality, you'll see just walking down the street.
Okay, so the big thing yesterday was Abdul Carter. There was a shoulder injury, but he was going to be able to do his pro day at Penn State. Now there's a foot problem, and there's two options. I guess Rosenhaus is his agent, that either he'll rehab it and still do his pro day, or he'll take surgery now and be out 8 weeks. Is that going to affect his draft position, do you think?
I can't imagine it will.
Oh.
Just because of the rest of this class, right? There's not necessarily well, if Carter is the foot, we'll go to player B because we have them graded equally. Maybe Travis Hunter, but then you get to the second player in the draft and it's the same thing unless the team wants to take a quarterback. So, if he's going to be out longer than 2 months, it would be a bigger deal, but he'll be back for spring practices if he has a surgery now. And there really isn't, I don't think teams are going to be clamoring for, well, now Will Campbell's flying up the board or now Ted McMillan's flying up the board because Abdul Carter might miss the first week of OTAs. I just, because of the way the class is structured, I don't think this hurts him that much, if at all.
Okay, so Jeff Howe had a report that the guys he's talking to don't like these quarterbacks more than even he was aware of. Are you getting that sense too? What are people saying about, Shador Sanders and Cam Ward?
So I think as a whole, teams are not high on this quarterback class. But when you look at it from a Patriots point of view, you really only need 3 teams to be high on a quarterback to help you out in this draft. And that's the 3 ahead of them, the Titans, the Giants, and the Browns. And it does kind of sound like the Browns and the Giants especially may be more interested in a quarterback. If you look at the Giants specifically, Joe Shane, Brian Daboll, people are surprised they got back. They're probably in it for their jobs this year. They need to figure out something at quarterback. If they don't make the playoffs, they're probably going to get let go at the end of the season. Now, maybe that's in free agency, but you have the rumbling, maybe not, depending on what you're hearing at Starbucks, that Matthew Stafford is going to go to the Raiders. So that could, take an option off the table for the Giants. But I still think those teams are in. But I don't, a quarterback falling to 4 and somebody giving up a haul to the Patriots, that feels less likely at this point.
Yeah, I asked someone else this the other day, Alex, about how much your mind can change based on what you see as a scout or a coach at the combine. And of course, you can have your opinion change on a player, but I think maybe in past years it would affect your decision on a player that you'd be looking at for the 3rd or 4th round. This year, maybe it has the potential to affect your opinion on a player that you might end up selecting in the 1st or 2nd, just based on the strength of the overall draft.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's how those players are viewed. I talked to somebody yesterday about the wide receivers position specifically, and a lot of people know Ted McMillan from Arizona, who's towards the top of the draft, but I asked him, after that, where's the next guys? And there's a group of receivers, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, that are currently projected to be late 1st, early 2nd round picks. And this person told me, I don't know if they'll go before the 3rd, or I don't know if they should go before the 3rd, just based on their talent in a typical draft. So teams are going to treat more of these players, especially at positions like tackle, receiver, where this draft is thinner, quarterback. I think they're going to treat some of those guys more like mid-round picks than they maybe would in other years. I'll just say this, though, to the changing opinion of prospects. Quarterbacks, that's always a little bit more at the combine because it is such a mental position. So to be able to meet with the guys and sit in a room with them and kind of get an understanding of their thought process and their personality, that can impact the stock more than it would for a guy at another position.
Alex, you mentioned Ted McMillan, and I think I'm saying Ted. It's Ted, right?
Yeah.
I know his name is impossible to pronounce. Ted McMillan. All right. Now, he's all over the place. We talked to a draft expert, quote unquote expert, that said he would have been rated around Odunze last year if he was in the draft. Then you're hearing that teams don't have him in the top 10, top
Within
15.
the last week, he's sliding.
Like he's all over the place.
Yeah.
His film, from what I've seen, I mean, he's big, he's like slippery, but he doesn't look lightning fast. What and the Patriots obviously need a receiver.
Right.
Are you hearing that would be a big reach at 4?
Yeah, that seems to be the case because, look, he's very technically skilled. He moves well. He's got great hands. He's good at the catch point. But the league is trending more and more towards wide receivers that are elite athletes. And it's, we'll go find this great athlete and teach him how to play receiver. McMillan's the antithesis of that. So it's copycat league. People follow trends. He's a talented player, but he bucks the trend so much of what teams want at that position. And without top-level athleticism, there always are questions about talent translating to the NFL. So I think 4 would be a reach. I still think he's going to go in the top 10 just because of the value of the wide receiver position overall. But yeah, it seems like every day I'm here, I'm hearing that he's fallen another 1 or 2 spots.
And people make fun of it, but there is a very important arm measure coming up. And what are you hearing about this?
Well, which one? There's a couple. So Mason Graham's is today. We'll hear about that today. And then I'm sure you're talking about the one Will Campbell on Sunday.
Yeah, Will Campbell, if you don't know,
Yeah.
Will Campbell is considered to be the best tackle in the class, but there are concerns about his arm length. And I've heard like good GMs make a good point about it. Yeah, there's exceptions to every rule, but I don't want to make that exception.
Because once you make one,
right, exactly,
you have a whole team worth of them.
It's easy to like poo-poo it, but if that's the industry standard and he's not it, you're taking a big chance taking someone with any question marks at 4. What are you hearing about him? And how big is this measurement thing happening?
Yeah, it's big. I think you're taking a risk with anybody at 4 in this draft. And Mike Vrabel talked about this on Tuesday, that arm length is good as long as you know how to use it, right? If you have 34-inch arms, but you don't know what you're doing, that's not going to get you as far as having 33-inch arms, but being very technically skilled. So it sounds like Campbell's going to be right on that 33-inch number. And to your point, Fred, everybody breaks, there's exceptions to the rule, but where are you willing to make that exception? Every team probably has a different number. Is he a tackle at 32 7/8, at 33 flat, at 33 1/4? And that's what it's going to come down to. The Titans, when Mike Vrabel was there, had some shorter-armed offensive linemen, so maybe that's in play. But it's also going to set the top of the draft, because if Will Campbell's a guard, he's still going to be a very good guard, but guards don't go in the top 10.
That's so funny, because I was going to ask you that. If you take Will Campbell at 4 and he ends up being a good guard, like a 10-year guard, is that a whiff of a pick, in your opinion?
Like for this, where the Patriots are right now,
At 4 it is. Hell yeah,
well,
at 4
because that adds to the pressure, because you have to think of that. Because if I take Will Campbell and he becomes a solid NFL player, but he's a guard, and I took him at 4, that's still a miss if I'm the front office.
It absolutely
which
is.
makes this pick even more precarious, because you would think, oh wow, well, we got a starter for the next 10 years, but based on where you're picking, that would still be considered
and you have guards already that are starting capable. You don't need a guard. You need a tackle.
Correct. But, I mean, guards do get taken in the top 10, like elite guards. They have getting taken in the top 10, top 15, but and then they get hurt all the time. All right, I'm thinking of one in particular. All right, look, Alex, please stay on with us. So much more to talk about. It's exciting. I don't know why we don't have you on more often, but you seem to be the property of Felger and Maz, to be honest.
Yeah.
Is I think what my opinion has been. But John, you got something for me.
Yeah, the more we talk about this draft, at least in this conversation, the more I realize that it's probably better if the Patriots trade back. I mean, you were saying, anything is a risk. It comes with risk at 4. Yeah. So if you were the Patriots, do you trade back? And if you do, how far do you drop?
So I think you try. The thing is, like, I hear people say, well, Will Campbell, I don't love the risk at 4, but I'd love to take him at 7. Okay. Well, who's going between 4 and 7 for him to get there, right? It's kind of who are teams moving up for. If they can get, a top 50 pick and a future top 50 pick to move back 3 or 4 spots, I think that's ideal. I look at the Raiders at 6. If they are sold on a quarterback, do you get 37 in a future second? And now you have 37 and 38 in the second round and room to maneuver. How far back would I go? I mean, look, if somebody's willing to give up like future firsts, I'll go back to the 20s. Realistically, I think you want to stay in the top 10, 12 picks. That's kind of where the draft drops off to that next tier. And that's where you start talking about a guy maybe like Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, or one of these Georgia linebackers, Mikael Williams, Jalen Walker.
Okay. Is there a player that you think would it be like Shador Sanders or something? If you're a Patriots fan, you know, you want quarterbacks taken before the Patriots pick.
Right.
But if one's not by 4, like the 3 teams that need quarterbacks, and then there's like a Vegas sitting there, is that kind of what you're rooting for at that point? Like, what are you rooting for in the top 3 if you're a Patriots fan?
2 quarterbacks and not Abdul Carter, right? For this Abdul Carter injury to be just serious enough that for whatever reason, one of those teams wants to pass on him, the other 2 decide to take quarterbacks, but the injury is not significant enough that it really impacts him, right? The other interesting scenario, and I heard you guys talking about this last week, is what if you go 2 quarterbacks and Carter at the top? Well, now Travis Hunter's sitting there, and Travis Hunter comes with some risk as well. Tremendous player, but comes with some risk. And the Patriots have kind of talked like they want to focus on the trenches in this draft. Do you take Travis Hunter at 4? Or, you know, you might get more of a haul for him than you get for either of the quarterbacks. You consider moving back. I think I saw you guys would take Hunter there. It would be a really tough decision. I would at least look at what I'm getting, right? If you're going to get a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a future first, that's a lot when, look, Travis Hunter's a great player. This team doesn't need a great player. They need multiple great players.
Yeah, and if a team was willing to trade to 4 and give up future firsts in better drafts, I would be very surprised. But if I was the Patriots, I certainly, in that case, I'd trade the
Anything
pick.
short of that, though, you absolutely take Travis Hunter.
Right.
You just need players.
Right. Like if it was just to move down and acquire more picks in this draft, I probably would take Travis Hunter.
I'm with you.
Yeah, you know, based on what people are saying about how much better Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are than anyone else in this draft. Because, again, I know it's a position, one of the very few positions that you already have a competent starter, like an all-pro level starter at. But there's worse problems to have than, you know, 2 great corners. Yes.
I will say, like, being here, I'm hearing more and more that there are teams that view Hunter primarily as a wide receiver. The Browns, Barry, their GM, said that that's one of those teams. There's a handful more as well. I do wonder if the Patriots are maybe in that camp where they would draft Hunter to play receiver. It's a bigger need. I still think he could be a great player at that position. Maybe they bring him in and he's playing offense here.
Does his like size kind of scare you in that? Is he like does he win the Heisman last year if he's only a receiver? You understand what I'm saying? Is he this big a prospect if he's only a receiver? It's his novelty and his athleticism that makes him so unique.
I don't think he'd be as popular. I don't know if he'd have won the Heisman, but he would be the best or second best receiver in this draft. Yeah, absolutely. The size is the big concern, and durability, which was an issue in college, is the big concern. But when you talk about this draft, right, you're not going to get anybody without that sort of question. I would have him. You talked about last year, McMillan is kind of rated similarly to Odunze. I would have Hunter right there as a receiver in that same group.
Okay, so in terms of free agency, it doesn't look great at the receiver position, so maybe you are looking for a receiver. It looks like T. Higgins won't be available. Godwin might not be available. If you're the Patriots, where are you investing your money? What would be an ideal free agent period for you for the Patriots this offseason?
I think you hammer the trenches. I think you have the recognition that although they want that wide receiver and they need that guy's just not available right now unless, you know, these rumblings about DK Metcalf become true and he's suddenly available, or somebody else randomly, some receiver requests a trade, which does happen.
Real quick, though,
trade came out of nowhere.
What would you give up? Like DK Metcalf, if Seattle's willing to give up on him, I would assume is not as good as he was, and is not going to be that same kind of receiver.
Andrew Callahan wrote about this. He said a 2 and a conditional 4. That was his proposed
Would
trade.
Would you give up a second-round pick for DK Metcalf now?
Yeah, I think if he gets moved, it's because they can't figure out a new contract more than the ability.
Okay.
So I look at the Brandon Ayuk offer last year, and Metcalf's a little bit older. He's not coming off quite the same production. So you trim that down a little bit, and it would be a second and a fourth. And especially in this draft, I look at that, the 4th round pick, whatever, at 38, you're not getting a player, especially a receiver, better than DK Metcalf at 38. And let's say you move down from like 4 to 6 and you get a second round pick. Well, now you've recouped that pick, and all it took to get Metcalf was moving down 2 spots.
Yeah, and in that scenario, I see it. What worries me about it is that conceivably, when you're really competing, right? Like when you're in a place where
Yeah.
you're going to be really competitive, is Metcalf a part of that, right? Like the trenches, I understand because there's a tangible, immediate result of that. You're protecting May. You're protecting his fundamentals, his mechanics. You're protecting his health. You know, you don't have an NFL offensive line which you just can't not play with. I understand that the receiver position is also valuable for him.
Yeah.
But it's not as tangible right away. So I don't know. You talk to people, and if the second round of this draft sucks, certainly if you can recoup a second round pick by trading down, then then the DK Metcalf thing seems a lot better. Where does the offensive line in free agency look, and how much is it going to cost the Patriots? Is there going to be a lot of competition?
Yeah, because there's not a lot of guys available, and it sounds like this week Ronnie Stanley's going back to Baltimore. That was the top tackle. So you're talking about Alaric Jackson from the Rams, who's been inconsistent, and he's also a short arm guy. You're talking about Cam Robinson from the Vikings, who's probably a bridge player at this point. And I think those are the only two like definitive starting left tackles. After that, you're talking about guys who you're going to want to be in a competition. So that's part of the reason, like to go back to Metcalf real quick, I would make that trade if there was a DK Metcalf equivalent available to tackle. I would absolutely rather do that. But that guy's not there because there's not enough tackles, especially left tackles, for all 32 teams right now. So any team that has a guy that can play isn't letting him get out of the building because it's going to be incredibly difficult to replace him. So that's the big question. We all know tackle is the biggest.
What exciting benefits do you get as a Hurts?
Between free agency, between the draft, there just really are not a lot of options, and it's going to create competition. These guys are going to end up getting paid much more than they're probably worth because they can command it, because it's such an important position and there are no other options.
Okay, so if that's not an option in free agency, is there a chance that somebody, I mean, they're going to be drafted, there are going to be left tackles drafted. Is there anyone that you're thinking, all right, not a lot of conversation about this guy, might even be a third or a fourth rounder, but he could actually end up being a starter after a year or two?
So Anthony Belton from North Carolina State, big guy, 6'6", 340, plays on the left side there. Good athlete for his size. His footwork is the big question, which sometimes those bigger guys that aren't as technically sound move to right tackle in the NFL. Now, they could use a right tackle as well, so that wouldn't necessarily be a bad pick. Of the day 3 tackles, he's probably my favorite, but he's hardly a guarantee.
Okay.
All right.
It's so concerning to think that you might end up with a guy who is going to be truly a guard at best, and I understand they do get drafted sometimes high up. You mentioned it earlier, Fred. It just doesn't happen all that often, and talk about a position.
It's not a Cole Strange every year.
Well,
Yeah.
but positions of need. I would love to have DK Metcalf here, and if it's a second and a fourth to have it, I mean, the guy plays. He's missed 3 games in the entirety of his career. 3 games. So the guy plays, and he's out there, and he'd be a veteran presence, and all that's great. But I don't want to be giving up any draft picks if it means there's somebody down there that could turn into a left tackle for this team, even if it's a year or two down the line.
Well, they have enough draft capital where they can move around the board, right? If that 4th round pick they trade for Metcalf is how they'd get Belton, they have a 5th, 3 7ths. Like, they can move back up and get the guy they need to. They have a ton of flexibility, so I wouldn't worry about it so much in that regard.
All right. I won't worry.
What's on the what's Alex Barth Day like today?
So I'm recording a couple podcasts after this. I'll have Trags on, Mike Petralia, who used to be in Boston. He covers the Bengals. Going to see if there's any chance maybe T. Higgins becomes available. Travis Hunter is speaking today at 11 o'clock, so we'll get some insight from him, hopefully, on what position he wants to play, what position teams want him to play, things like that. I'll have Phil Perry on a podcast later today as well, do a podcast with Matt Dolph, and then the workouts start at 3 o'clock, so we'll start getting into some of that stuff.
Well, I have to ask you about this. There was apparently a lot of drama at the whole combine yesterday because this guy Schultz, he put a report out that Brady flew Matthew Stafford out to some, luxurious ski resort out there in the West. And then Ian Rappaport said, that's not true. And then what happened, Alex? You know what happened between the two.
There was should I say alleged, I think, based on that story, an alleged verbal altercation between the two at a Starbucks over whether or not Rappaport, I think Schultz was upset. Rappaport called him out, but if he's hearing something different, right? He said something different, but face to face, I think was the phrase they used in that PFT article.
Is
Schultz face to face in the Starbucks?
How big a guy is Schultz? Because Rappaport's no large man. How big is is Schultz? Do you know?
I've never seen him in person. He's not. I think it's just like average size.
Okay.
From what I can kind of gather.
But you got to love that. If you're in that Starbucks and you yourself are an NFL writer, you have to be on pins and needles when that's happening. That's like a gift from God.
Well, on the flip side, so I saw in that article, they mentioned they were taking statements from witnesses. Imagine not really following the NFL, and then these NFL security people coming up and asking you about two reporters fighting. You're thinking, what did I walk into?
Yeah, exactly. You'd be like, I didn't know I was in the midst of such great celebrity. I've shared a steam room with Ben Volen once, I'll have you know. Maybe even more than once.
I didn't know that.
Oh, he belongs to my gym. Huh. All right, Alex Barth, have a great time. We appreciate it, and maybe we'll talk to you again this week if you'd have us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.